Hey, what's going on everyone? I'm Jakejames Lugo, and welcome to the channel, where you'll find some of the most fair and honest game reviews out here. And just in time for the Metroid 35th anniversary, and just before Metroid Dread comes out for the Nintendo Switch, let's talk about Metroid Fusion on the Game Boy Advance. And funny enough, from what I see online, a lot of you out there have never played this game before. Metroid Fusion is the fourth mainline game of the ongoing Metroid series from Nintendo, released in 2002 for the Game Boy Advance. Unlike games that came afterwards, Fusion is the most current game to the canon timeline of the main series, with a lot of spin-offs that fill in the gaps in between mainline Metroid games. That is, until Metroid Dread eventually comes out. Anyway, the events of Metroid Fusion take place almost immediately after what happened in Super Metroid. Our favorite bounty hunter Samus Aran investigates a planet called SR-388, where she's attacked by an organism known as the X-Parasite. While escorting a BSL ship to a nearby BSL space station, Samus loses consciousness and crashes. After being recovered and brought back to the Galactic Federation, scientists discover that the X-Parasite is infecting her suit and attacking her nervous system. It's only through the help of a vaccine developed from the cells of the baby Metroid she met in the last game that she survives. However, this comes at a price. Samus will never again be affected by the X-Parasite, but she also gains the Metroid's weakness to the cold from the vaccine. While recovering from her operation, the BSL station over SR-388 suffers an explosion, and Samus is called in to investigate the cause of it. It's there that Samus discovers that the X-Parasite can replicate other organisms, including the one that attacked her old suit, codenamed the SAX. With the SAX now mimicking her at her full abilities and the safety of the galaxy at risk, Samus sets out to destroy the X-Parasite before it's too late. Compared to other Metroid games, there's a lot happening here that shows a different side to the Metroid universe. I like how the Metroids aren't the main baddie here, however that doesn't mean that they don't get involved with everything that's going on. It makes things a little bit more interesting. But does that mean that this chapter of the Metroid series is a fantastic gaming experience? So if you played any other Metroid game besides this one thing that you'll notice in common between all the games in the series is that there isn't a whole lot of dialogue that goes on. Samus doesn't really talk to many other characters, they don't really have a lot of exchanges. However, there is a lot of inner monologuing that goes on. Really, it's Samus conveying to the player like some of her inner thoughts and just her emotions that are going on within inside of her based on all the stuff that's going on around her. However, I do have to say that there are a couple spots where Samus does have a dialogue with the AI called Adam that's in the computer that's really the thing that's directing her around the BSL station. I thought that was pretty cool, but the inner monologue stuff is very Metroid, and that's the thing that this series does very well. However, one thing I will say that a Metroid game does very well, and this game is no exception, is the atmosphere. The atmosphere in this game is superb. It is so freaking awesome. There's like this vibe of like something lurking in the dark, like this foreboding emotion that's just lingering right over you the entire game. It's something that worked out very good with Super Metroid on the Super Nintendo, and it works well here, and it's been a staple for the Metroid series from pretty much almost the very beginning. I know that the original NES Metroid had something like this, but because of the hardware limitations, you really couldn't get that vibe like what you got with the Super Nintendo, and definitely not like what you got here. I like it. I think that's one of the things, like besides the gameplay, that works out well for a Metroid game. This is something that a lot of fans really need to appreciate a little bit more, because other games that are very similar to Metroid just don't do this very well. It's just actually really freaking cool to me. Speaking of gameplay, let's talk about that, because yo, let me tell you, it just feels good to play a game that just feels good to play. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I know that sounds weird, but roll with me with this for a second. Let me explain myself. Let's be honest. Much of what you're doing in Metroid Fusion is the same as Super Metroid or any other game from the series. I mean, if it ain't broke, then why fix it, right? But what I like about Fusion is that there's light additions that make the experience feel a little bit more refreshing, rather than redundant. Samus can explore the 6 sectors of the BSL station, obtaining new abilities along the way that open up new areas to explore. This is the standard for any Metroid game. However, the game adds new abilities for Samus to use, such as grabbing onto ledges and climbing up ladders. It was a first for the series, even though it might not seem like much now. But go back and play Super Metroid after this and you'll appreciate why it's here. Another thing changed was Samus' ability to absorb the X-Parasite when she destroys an enemy. Unlike in previous games where you have to walk over a pickup, the X-Parasites will linger around and even spawn another enemy nearby if you ignore it. Samus could gain health or missile ammo when she absorbs them, depending on the color of the X she finds. In later portions of Fusion, different color X-Parasites will affect Samus in different ways. At first, the blue X-Parasites will freeze and damage Samus heavily, but after getting the Varia suit upgrade, she'll be able to absorb them and gain a good chunk of health. I like this a lot because it keeps mixing things up and giving you more story for an otherwise basic ability. Speaking of her suit, Samus looks different than her previous iterations. Even though the majority of her abilities are the same, the Fusion suit has become popular in its own right, for good reason too. Now, as far as exploration goes, this isn't a tough game to figure out. Most of the time you're shown where you need to investigate or revisit on the map. You might have to look around for nearby upgrades or a suspicious wall to open up new areas, but it's never too confusing. There are very few instances where you're not given no direction, and by that point you'll already have a good idea of how to get around. To quote a very famous nerd with glasses, it's definitely not one of those "where the fuck do I go" type of games. I've heard from different people over the years that Metroid Fusion doesn't really feel like a Metroid game, and maybe this is the reason why. Honestly though, I felt that the entire experience was enjoyable and plays exactly like how Metroid should play. I never felt that exploring was discouraged or taken away from me at any point. I could still go off the directed path and discover a hidden energy tank or a missile tank upgrade if I wanted to. And on top of that, you end up getting all of your abilities at a reasonable pace by the time the game comes to an end. Something I want to touch on real quick is the boss fights in Metroid Fusion. Like any other Metroid game, these boss fights are not that difficult. They appear every once in a while when you're about to get a brand new ability to help you explore or something really important's about to go down. But there are a couple boss fights in Metroid Fusion that are a little bit cheap. They're not like crazy difficult, but in certain scenarios they could be like stupid cheap, and you might have to redo them a few times before you destroy them. But overall, these are not tough boss fights. I appreciate that, and I'm pretty sure many of you out there will appreciate that as well. But the one thing related to that I do want to talk about is the SAX, because I actually really like the way that the SAX is built up throughout the entirety of Metroid Fusion. If anything, I really compare it to the Tyrant that you'd see in Resident Evil 2 Remake, or something like the Nemesis from Resident Evil 3, where it's this like gargantuan enemy or this really big boss, big baddie, that you can't do much about, especially for the majority of the game, up until like the climax right up to the very end, or right before the final boss fight. And it's done in a similar fashion here with the SAX in Metroid Fusion. That being said, however, once you get to that final battle with the SAX, when you got all your abilities and you're ready to go, you're ready to throw down, it is kind of mediocre. It's not that great. I don't think it's as built up. It's not at least, living up to the hype that the entire game like really builds this thing up to be. I like the foreboding nature of it. It goes well with the atmosphere, but the actual fight itself, it's kind of meh. I wish it was a little bit better, but I can't really complain because the majority of the game, this thing is awesome. On top of that too, it's actually not the final fight of Metroid Fusion when you finally face the SAX. You actually have to fight another giant Omega Metroid, which has the SAX involved with it. I don't want to spoil it too much, but there's some stuff that goes down where everything just comes together very nicely. It's not like a crazy good fight for the SAX itself, but I understand what was going on leading up into the final portions of the plot. But again, that's just a me thing. Maybe you guys feel a little bit differently. Let me know down below in the comments section. And finally, let's talk about the bonus content in Metroid Fusion, which is very different compared to other games, at least in the way that it was handled. And for Nintendo, who's always thinking outside the box most of the time, this was pretty cool back then. Like, for real. Believe it or not, Metroid Fusion has some neat unlockables, but not everything is exclusive for Metroid Fusion itself, and you can't get everything from solely playing the game. First off, like in previous Metroid games, if you manage to complete Fusion within a set amount of time, you'll get different win screens after the credits. If you finish the game in under 2 hours and get a full 100%, it lets you see the best ending screen, with variations on it depending on how many extra tanks you'd find and how fast you reach the end. That's still pretty cool, but it can be tough to achieve without prior knowledge of every area within the entire game. Now that's just for playing Metroid Fusion, and if you don't know where I'm going with this, you're in for a real treat. Metroid Fusion has the ability to link up with both Metroid Prime on the GameCube and Metroid Zero Mission on the Game Boy Advance. You need to have a Game Boy link cable to do this back then, but it was pretty cool seeing two games on different platforms communicating with each other. If you completed Metroid Prime and then linked up Metroid Fusion to it, you can unlock the Fusion suit for Samus to wear in Metroid Prime, as well as a fully playable version of the NES Metroid. That's pretty dope as a bonus for owning both games. On the flip side of that, if you connect Metroid Fusion to Metroid Zero Mission on the Game Boy Advance, you unlock a whole gallery of new images within Zero Mission. This is still very cool, but I do wish in both cases that you got some bonuses unlocked within Metroid Fusion by linking up to either game. It's just weird to not get anything for this game by doing so. I even had to look up to make sure that I wasn't missing anything, and yeah, you really don't get anything unlocked for linking up Fusion with any of those other games. All the unlockables happen in both Prime and in Zero Mission. I mean, if you were really playing through all those Metroid games back in the day already, you were getting a lot of cool stuff. Maybe it's just me being nitpicky about it. Look, I know I'm being a pain in the butt here, but just roll with me with this. How cool would it have been if you would have been able to connect this game or link it up with Metroid Zero Mission and not only get something like the Zero suit in Metroid Fusion, which would have been sweet, but what about if you actually connected to Metroid Prime, right? And you got a whole nother section of the station to explore, a whole new area to mess around with, or something that really mixed up the game overall. To me, I love stuff like that, and it just would have made sense if Metroid Fusion was able to get some more bonus unlockables or other things just by doing the link stuff between those two other games. That would have been really freaking sweet, but alas, this is just a me thing, me being very nitpicky and me being a pain in the butt. Totally understand that. For what we got here though, it's still pretty freaking cool, especially if you were a Metroid fan back then and you were buying Metroid Prime, you were buying Metroid Zero Mission, you stuck with this series, you were definitely rewarded as a fan. So after going through everything, can I recommend that you play Metroid Fusion on the Game Boy Advance? Of course! Despite all the low points that I brought up here, and there's not a lot of them to begin with, this game still holds up incredibly well. The experience is short, lasting about 3 or so hours, but you're getting a lot of very solid content in here. It's a real shame how Nintendo doesn't have an official way to buy Metroid Fusion from the Nintendo eShop, at least as of the making of this video review. But if you're able to find a Game Boy Advance with a Metroid Fusion cartridge nearby, do yourself a favor and play it. It's very good. You can probably knock this game out within a weekend, maybe even get 100% with all the extra stuff too. To me, Metroid Fusion was a great entry into the Metroid franchise, and it definitely deserves all the love that it's gotten over the years. And there you go, everyone. Those are my thoughts about Metroid Fusion. I've been wanting to talk about this game for so long now at this point, and it just seemed like the perfect opportunity to do so. Again, just in time for the Metroid 35th anniversary. That's like my contribution to that anniversary for that game series. And what I didn't know, it's actually a Satoru Iwata joint. I didn't know this for like the longest time. Homeboy produced so many of those games when he was at Nintendo. That's pretty freaking dope, but anyway, hopefully you guys enjoyed the review as much as I did playing this game again for review. There's just so much to say about this game, and it gets me hyped up for Metroid Dread that's coming very soon. But as always, with any other game that we review on this channel, that's just my thoughts and opinions about Metroid Fusion. Let me know your own thoughts about this game down below in the comments section. Tell me, are you a big Metroid fan? Are you going to check out Metroid Dread when it comes out? What are some of your other favorite Metroid games, or some of the things that maybe you dislike about the Metroid series? You know, talk to me about Metroid stuff because it's the 35th anniversary. It seems very appropriate to do so now and kind of give more hype to this series and give it more love that it definitely deserves. But anyway, put all that stuff down below in the comments section. Thanks a bunch for watching the video. I really appreciate it a ton. I'll have more videos for you to enjoy here on the side that I know you'll love. Make sure you subscribe to the channel and hit that bell icon too. Don't forget to visit my Patreon linked below for early access to new videos every week, and join the Discord server too. It's linked in the description box below. You'll definitely love being a part of it. Thanks again, peace out, and stay epic everybody.